Captain Emma Reeves was finally vindicated on a Thursday morning at 09 for 7 hours, exactly 18 months after being accused of the worst professional failure a nurse could commit. The Navy Inspector General's report cleared her of all charges, confirmed she'd followed proper protocols, stated unequivocally that the patient death had not been her fault. Emma should have felt relief, victory, vindication. Instead, she felt sick, because in fighting to clear her name, she'd destroyed someone who'd been trying to help her, someone who was now facing the same accusations Emma had just escaped, and Emma didn't know how to live with that. It started 21 months earlier at Naval Hospital Naples, Italy, when Lieutenant James Sullivan died in the ICU under Emma's care. Sullivan was 26 years old, post-surgical complication from an appendectomy that should have been routine. He'd developed sepsis that progressed rapidly, despite aggressive treatment. Emma had done everything right, administered medications precisely, monitored vitals continuously, called for attending physician consultation when Sullivan's condition deteriorated, followed every protocol exactly as written, but Sullivan died anyway. His family was devastated. His father, retired Marine colonel, demanded an investigation, wanted to know how a routine surgery had ended with his son in a body bag. The Navy opened a review, standard procedure for unexpected deaths. They examined Emma's documentation, interviewed staff, reviewed the medical timeline. Their finding: Captain Reeves followed all appropriate protocols. Lieutenant Sullivan's death was an unfortunate but unavoidable outcome of rapid septic progression. No negligence found. Colonel Sullivan rejected that finding, hired a civilian medical expert who reviewed the case and concluded that Emma had missed early warning signs, had delayed calling for physician consultation, had administered medications in the wrong sequence. The expert's opinion was technically wrong. Documentation proved she'd done everything correctly. It was persuasive enough that Colonel Sullivan pressured the Navy to reopen the investigation. Second investigation was more thorough, more invasive. They questioned Emma for hours about every decision she'd made, every medication timing, every assessment. And they found something. One medication had been documented as given at 14:37 hours. But the pharmacy dispensing record showed it hadn't been available until 14:42 hours, a 5-minute discrepancy, small, possibly just a documentation error. Might have written the order time instead of the administration time, but Colonel Sullivan's lawyer seized on it, claimed it proved Emma had falsified her records. If she'd lied about one timestamp, what else had she lied about? The Navy suspended Emma pending further investigation, restricted her to administrative duties, made it clear that her career was in jeopardy. Emma was terrified. 21 years of exemplary service, never a single complaint, and now she was facing possible court-martial over a 5-minute timestamp discrepancy. She needed help, needed someone to verify her timeline, needed corroboration that she'd followed protocols exactly. That's when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park stepped forward. Park had been the charge nurse on duty the night Sullivan died. She'd been overseeing the entire ICU, but hadn't been directly involved in Sullivan's care. That was Emma's patient, Emma's responsibility. But Park had witnessed some of Emma's actions, had seen her administer medications, had observed her calling for physician consultation. "I'll testify," Park told Emma. "I saw you do everything right. I can verify your timeline. You're sure? This could blow back on you, I'm sure. You're being railroaded by a grieving father with enough rank to intimidate investigators. Someone needs to stand up for you." Park submitted a formal statement, detailed everything she'd witnessed, confirmed Emma's timeline, explained that the 5-minute timestamp discrepancy was clearly a documentation error, not falsification. The investigators interviewed Park extensively. She was credible, detailed, and unshakable in her testimony. And then the investigators started finding problems with Park's own documentation. Other patients Park had supervised that night, other timestamps that didn't quite align, other small discrepancies that could be innocent documentation errors, or could be signs of systematic falsification. Emma watched in horror as the investigation, that was supposed to clear her name, started targeting Park. Instead, "They're going after you, because you helped me," Emma told Park. "You need to withdraw your statement." "I'm not withdrawing truth. You did everything right. Sullivan's death wasn't your fault. I'm not going to let them railroad you just because his father has connections. But they're investigating you now. They're saying your documentation is unreliable. Let them investigate. My documentation is fine. They're just trying to discredit me because I contradicted their narrative. Park's jaw was set. I'm not backing down. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to tell Park to save herself, but she also desperately needed Park's testimony to clear her name, so she stayed quiet and let Park fight for her. The investigations had grown more complex. Emma's case was still open. Park was now facing her own investigation for documentation irregularities. And then, the investigators found something else. 2 years earlier, Park had been involved in a medication error. A patient had received double dose of a cardiac medication due to a miscommunication between Park and another nurse. The patient had been fine. The error was caught quickly and corrected, but it had never been formally reported. The Navy required all medication errors to be reported, even if no harm occurred. Park had failed to report it, had instead handled it quietly with the other nurse involved, ensured the patient was monitored, and moved on. It was a violation of reporting protocols, minor in the scope of things, but technically a violation. The investigators added failure to report to Park's growing list of problems. Emma felt sick. This is my fault. If you hadn't testified for me, they wouldn't be digging into your past. They're grasping at straws. The medication error was 2 years ago and resulted in 0 patient harm. It's not relevant to your case or to my credibility, but they're using it to discredit you. They're saying you have a pattern of cutting corners and covering mistakes. I don't have a pattern. I have one unreported error from 2 years ago and some documentation timestamps that are slightly off because I was managing 12 patients simultaneously. Park's voice was firm. I'm not withdrawing my statement. You did nothing wrong. I saw it. I'm testifying to what I saw. Emma wanted to tell her to stop, wanted to protect Park from the consequences of helping her, but Emma also wanted to be vindicated, wanted her career back, wanted her name cleared, so she let Park continue fighting, and told herself it would work out. Emma's case was finally going to a formal hearing. The evidence would be presented. Park would testify. Emma would be vindicated or convicted. Park's case was also going to a hearing. She was being charged with systematic documentation, falsification, and failure to report a medication error. If convicted, she'd face dishonorable discharge and loss of all benefits. I'm sorry, Emma told Park the week before their hearings. I never meant for this to happen to you. It's not your fault. The investigators are corrupt. They're protecting Sullivan's father's ego by finding someone to blame. First it was you, now it's me. Eventually they'll realize neither of us did anything wrong. What if they don't realize that? What if you get convicted? Park was quiet for a moment. Then I get convicted, but at least you'll be cleared. Your testimony corroborates mine. If I'm shown to have followed protocols correctly in your case, that contradicts their narrative that I systematically falsify documentation, so your conviction clears me. Your vindication proves I was telling the truth, which eventually clears me on appeal. Park smiled without humor. We're tied together now. Either we both get cleared, or we're both going down. Emma wanted to believe that, wanted to believe they'd both be vindicated, but she had a terrible feeling that the Navy was going to save face by convicting Park while clearing Emma, and she was right. Emma's hearing came first. The evidence was presented, her meticulous documentation, Park's corroborating testimony, the medical expert opinions showing she'd followed all protocols, the explanation that the 5-minute timestamp was clearly a documentation error rather than falsification. The medical board ruled, Captain Emma Reeves is cleared of all charges. Lieutenant Sullivan's death was an unavoidable outcome. No negligence occurred. Captain Reeves's documentation was accurate and thorough. Emma was vindicated. Fully, completely. Her career was restored. Her reputation cleared. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt dread. Because Park's hearing was next week, and the same investigators who just cleared Emma were now prosecuting Park. Their argument, Captain Reeves was cleared because her documentation was reliable, but Commander Park's documentation shows systematic irregularities. The fact that Park testified in Reeves's defense doesn't prove Park's own documentation is reliable. Used Emma's vindication as proof that Park should be convicted. Park's lawyer tried to argue that was illogical. Commander Park's testimony was instrumental in clearing Captain Reeves. The board just ruled that Reeves's documentation was accurate. Park corroborated that documentation. Therefore, Park's testimony and her own documentation practices are reliable. The prosecutor countered. Captain Reeves's documentation speaks for itself. Commander Park's testimony was helpful but not necessary, and Park's own documentation shows a pattern of irregularities that raise questions about her reliability. It was circular logic. Park was reliable enough to help clear Emma, but unreliable enough to be convicted herself. The medical board deliberated for 2 days. Their ruling: Commander Sarah Park is guilty of systematic documentation, falsification, and failure to report a medication error. Sentence: reduction in rank to lieutenant, forfeiture of 2 years' pay, and administrative discharge. Park was destroyed. Her career ended. Her benefits reduced. 23 years of service ending in disgrace. And Emma was restored. Her name cleared. Her career back on track, all because Park had tried to help her. Emma went to Park's apartment. Park had already started packing. The Navy had given her 30 days to vacate base housing. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." Park looked at her with exhausted eyes. "It's not your fault. It's the Navy's fault for needing someone to blame when Sullivan died. It's his father's fault for not accepting that sometimes people die despite perfect care. It's the investigator's fault for being more interested in closing cases than finding truth. But if you hadn't testified for me, then you'd be where I am now. Convicted, discharged, career over." Park taped another box shut. "At least one of us survived. That's not good enough. I need to appeal your conviction. I need to testify that you were telling the truth, that your documentation was reliable, that the board was wrong. Emma, they used your vindication to convict me. Your testimony won't help. It'll just prove their point, that you were accurate, and I wasn't. That's insane. You corroborated my timeline. If I was accurate, you were accurate. Logic doesn't matter when they need a scapegoat." Park sat down heavily. "I knew the risk when I testified. I knew they might come after me, but I also knew you didn't deserve to be destroyed over a 5-minute timestamp error. So you took the bullet meant for me. I took the bullet that was always going to hit someone. Sullivan's father has enough power that someone was going to pay for his son's death. Better me than you." Park smiled bitterly. "At least I got 23 years out of my career. If you'd been convicted, you'd have lost 21 years. The math is slightly better this way." "That's not math. That's sacrifice. Call it whatever you want. It's done now." Emma left the apartment feeling like she was drowning. Park had saved her career by destroying her own, and Emma was supposed to just accept that and move on. She, COULDN, Emma filed a formal petition to reopen Park's case, argued that the conviction was unjust, that Park's documentation had been reliable, that the medication error from 2 years ago was irrelevant, that Park had been convicted because the Navy needed someone to blame, and Emma had been cleared. The Navy rejected the petition. Captain Reeves's case and Commander Park's case were separate proceedings. The board ruled appropriately in both cases, based on the evidence presented. Emma hired a civilian lawyer, prepared an appeal to military courts, gathered statements from other nurses who'd worked with Park and could testify to her reliability. The lawyer was skeptical. "Captain Reeves, I appreciate your loyalty to Commander Park, but appeals are difficult. The military courts defer heavily to medical board decisions. Unless you have new evidence, the evidence is that Park was reliable. She corroborated my timeline accurately. The board said so when they cleared me. Then they turned around and said she was unreliable when they convicted her. That's contradictory." "It's not contradictory from the board's perspective. They're saying your documentation stood on its own merit. Park's testimony was supportive but not determinative. Therefore, your reliability doesn't prove her reliability." That's double talk. That's military justice. They need to protect their decision in your case while also protecting their decision in her case. Admitting they were wrong about Park means admitting they might have been wrong about you. The lawyer leaned forward. "Captain, the Navy cleared you. Your career is intact. Your reputation is restored. Why risk that by fighting for someone whose conviction is already final? Because she's only convicted because she helped me. Because I owe her everything. Because I can't just accept that she was destroyed while I was saved. Then prepare to fight for years. And prepare for the possibility that you'll lose." Emma prepared to fight. The military appeals court rejected Emma's petition, ruled that Park's conviction was supported by evidence, and that Emma's vindication didn't prove Park's innocence. Emma appealed to the next level, filed with the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, argued that Park's conviction was retaliation for her testimony, that the Navy had systematically destroyed Park to justify clearing Emma, Park called her. "Emma, you need to stop." "I'm not stopping. This is wrong. It's over. I've accepted it. I've moved on. I'm working at a civilian hospital in Oregon. I'm rebuilding." Park's voice was tired. "You continuing to fight just keeps dragging this out. It keeps my name in the news as that nurse who was convicted. It's not helping me. It's hurting me. But you're innocent, and I'm convicted. Both things are true, and I need to live with the second truth because I can't change it." Park paused. "Emma, I made peace with this. I testified because it was right. I got convicted because the Navy needed someone to blame. That's the reality. Your fighting doesn't change the reality. It just keeps me stuck in it. So I should just accept that you sacrificed your career for mine. You should accept that I made a choice and I'm living with the consequences. And you should focus on your career and your patience in making sure Sullivan's death wasn't meaningless." "How do I make his death meaningful when someone else paid the price for it?" "By being the nurse you've always been, by following protocols, by training other nurses, by making sure what happened to Sullivan doesn't happen to someone else." Park's voice softened. "Emma, I don't regret testifying for you. I regret getting convicted, but I don't regret helping you. Don't make my choice meaningless by throwing your career away fighting a battle you can't win." Emma hung up, feeling worse than before. Park was right. The appeals weren't helping. They were just keeping both of them trapped in a nightmare neither could escape. But Emma couldn't stop, because stopping meant accepting that Park's sacrifice was just the cost of Emma's vindication. The Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces rejected Emma's final petition. The decision was final. Park's conviction would stand. Emma sat in her office at Naval Hospital Naples, looking at the rejection letter. 2 years of fighting, tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, endless documentation and briefs and arguments, all for nothing. Park was still convicted, still discharged, still marked as someone who'd falsified documentation and failed to report errors. And Emma was still vindicated, still had her career, still had her reputation. That the trade-off was complete and irreversible. Emma thought about resigning, walking away from the Navy that had destroyed an innocent woman to clear Emma's name, making some kind of statement about justice and integrity. But Park's words echoed. "Don't make my choice meaningless by throwing your career away." So Emma stayed, continued working, continued training nurses, continued following every protocol perfectly, documenting everything meticulously, making sure she honored the vindication Park had made possible, and she lived with the guilt. Emma was promoted to commander. It should have been a celebration. 26 years of service, advancement to senior officer rank, recognition of her skills and leadership. Instead, it felt hollow. She wrote to Park now, working as a nursing supervisor at a civilian hospital in Portland. They'd stayed in touch, sporadic, awkward emails every few months, neither quite knowing what to say to the other. "Congratulations on the promotion," Park wrote back. "You've earned it, and you're doing good work. I hear your safety protocols have been adopted across multiple naval hospitals. That matters. It doesn't feel like it matters when you lost your career, giving me mine." Emma replied. "I didn't give you your career. I testified to what I saw. The Navy made the choices that followed, clearing you and convicting me. Those were their choices, not mine and not yours. But you knew they might target you. You testified anyway, because it was true." "Emma, you're carrying guilt for something you didn't choose. You didn't ask me to testify. You didn't force the Navy to investigate me. You didn't vote to convict me." Park's next message came an hour later. "And you've spent 5 years trying to fix it, fighting appeals, challenging the conviction, sacrificing your own peace trying to restore mine. At some point, you have to accept that some injustices can't be fixed. How do you live with that? By living, by working, by helping patients, by training good nurses who follow protocols and document carefully and speak truth even when it's risky." Park paused. "I testified for you because you were a good nurse who didn't deserve to be destroyed. Don't waste that by destroying yourself with guilt." Emma read that message a dozen times, understood what Park was saying, but didn't know how to follow the advice. How do you accept being vindicated when someone else paid the price for that vindication? Emma retired as a captain after 31 years of service. Her retirement ceremony was well attended. Her record was spotless. Her contributions were significant. Park flew to Naples for the ceremony. Emma hadn't expected her to come. They met at a cafe afterward, two nurses whose lives had been tangled by one patient's unavoidable death. "Thank you for coming," Emma said. Wouldn't have missed it. 31 years, that's an accomplishment. 23 years was an accomplishment too. You deserved to retire with honors, not to be convicted and discharged. Park smiled. Emma, we've been having this conversation for 10 years. Can we maybe have a different one? What different conversation is there? You helped me and got destroyed for it. I helped you and you were vindicated. Those are different things. Park leaned forward. I was convicted because the Navy needed someone to blame. Not because I did anything wrong. Not because you did anything wrong. The system failed. We both know that. But the system failing doesn't mean your vindication was wrong or that my help was wasted. It means you paid for my restoration. It means I paid for the Navy's cowardice. Big difference. Park signaled for coffee. Emma, I've rebuilt. I have a good job. I train nurses. I make a difference. My life didn't end when I was discharged, just changed direction. And yes, I'd rather have finished my military career with honors. But I'd also rather you be here having a successful career than both of us being destroyed. That's not a real choice, but it was the choice the Navy gave us. And I chose you surviving over both of us going down. Park met her eyes, and I'd make the same choice again. Because good nurses like you are rare, and the Navy needs good nurses more than it needs to protect my career. Emma felt tears coming. I don't know how to accept that. Then don't accept it. Just honor it. Be the nurse I testified you were. Train the next generation. Make sure your protocols save lives. Make my sacrifice mean something by being worth saving. They sat in silence for a while. I'm sorry, Emma said finally, for everything that happened, for not being able to fix it, for your career ending the way it did. I know, and I forgive you for things that weren't your fault. Park smiled. Now can we please talk about something else? Because I came all this way for your retirement, and I'd like to celebrate your 31 years without also mourning my 23. They talked about other things, patients they'd saved, nurses they'd trained, lives they'd both touched, and for a few hours, Emma let herself feel something other than guilt. Not quite peace, but maybe acceptance. Park had paid the price for Emma's vindication. That was true and unchangeable. But Park was surviving, even thriving in her own way. And Emma was honoring that sacrifice by being the nurse Park had believed she was. It wasn't justice. It would never be justice. But it was all they had.